Okay. Hey, everybody, welcome to a little bit of a shorter version of WCA Extra. We just want to get Calvin Cutler on the horn. He was at the State House, really busy yesterday, covering the veto session. And it's kind of just a little bit of a breather now. And really just wanted to get Calvin on the horn and kind of just talk about, what happened yesterday. So, Calvin, first of all, I don't know if you can quite hear me yet. But
I can indeed. Thanks so much,
cool.
Sean.
Gotcha. Thanks for being here. And Calvin, I know yesterday, Democrats kind of used the supermajority to their advantage. Overrode 6 of the 7 of Governor Phil Scott's vetoes. If you could just kind of run us through, what those were and, kind of how that will impact Vermonters down the road here.
Yeah, you bet. I mean, yesterday was a real busy day at the State House. Lawmakers penciled in 2 days for the veto session, just in case some bills took longer than others. But like last year, state lawmakers were able to override a slew of vetoes in one day. In fact, they set a new record, overriding 6 vetoes in one day. And I think, it's on a number of bills that they've had different, a different opinion than the governor, especially on issues about spending and taxation. And I think the biggest one certainly was the yield bill. That's the one that sets property tax rates and also fully funds local school budgets as voted on by districts and by towns. That one also sets the property tax rate at about 13.8%. And, we heard a lot of debate yesterday on the floor from Democrats and Republicans about, the impact this is going to have on property taxpayers this year, the balance that we're all trying to strike in terms of meeting the needs of schools, but also the proposal that the Scott administration put forward last week, which some Democrats in the legislature panned as being fiscally irresponsible, basically saying that deficit spending and taking out from state reserves of the Ed Fund wasn't a responsible or prudent thing to do. So state lawmakers ended up overriding that veto. They also overrode the governor's veto on the Act 250 bill. This is this sweeping bill which really kind of shakes up, how Act 250 jurisdiction is applied in different parts of the state, more protections for natural resources and for really ecologically sensitive areas, but looser restrictions and looser Act 250 jurisdiction for places near urban centers or places just outside that are already hooked up to water and sewer. Democrats overrode the governor's veto on that. There were also a number of vetoes on or veto overrides, that is, in both the House and the Senate on the renewable energy standard, which seeks to incentivize more in-state renewable electricity generation from solar and wind and elsewhere, restorative justice, expanding opportunities for that, and also a ban on neonicotinoid pesticides as well, something that really has been challenging, is taken a real detrimental effect on some wildlife in Vermont, including pollinators. But I think one of the biggest and most interesting parts of the day, and maybe we can get into a little bit more, but it was the safe injection site proposal. As we know, fatal overdoses in Vermont are continuing to set new records, and they're still incredibly high, driven by a tainted drug supply and synthetic opioids. And so a lot of Democrats and even some Republicans at the State House have really, turned to the concept of a safe injection site, places where people can consume illicit narcotics under medical supervision, as being, one way that we can try to stem fatal overdoses. Governor Phil Scott has had practical objections to this bill and moral objections as well, and he vetoed it. And it passed through the Senate. The override vote passed through the Senate with flying colors, but it originally passed through the House with flying colors, but it failed originally in the
Yeah.
Senate, and there was a lot of behind-the-scenes maneuvering to get that across the finish line. So in the end, they ended up re-voting on it, and they did pass that veto override. So lawmakers overrode on 6 of 7 vetoes that the governor had issued.
Yeah.
The veto on data privacy, the data privacy bill, the Senate was not able to muster the votes to override that veto.
Yeah, and Calvin, I just want to touch quickly. I know a lot of our coverage the past weeks and months and et cetera has been about property taxes, and especially with school budgets. Still still kind of fighting to get them over the finish line. I think what I had read this morning was this sitting right around 14%. You're at the State House much more than I am. Is that a figure that lawmakers are comfortable with? They want it at this point. I mean, that's just kind of where it's settled.
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't think anybody is really comfortable with it. I think, no matter what your political stripe is,
Yeah.
Everybody knows that that's going to take a real hit on Vermonters' bottom line. The real balance that they've been trying to strike is, fully funding school budgets that were voted on, that are drafted and are voted on by local school voters and town meeting day voters. That's just how our education system works. So the state does have a obligation to fund those school budgets and not shortchange local communities, despite where that money is going or how local school districts are using that. So there is a obligation on behalf of the statewide education fund. The big question and the big debate is, what can state lawmakers and the governor and others do to bring down the property tax rate this year? And it's worth noting that it was the hike was at almost 20%. It was about 19% in the December 1st letter that Commissioner Craig Bolio, by state law, has to issue every year, sort of outlining where we stand in terms of education spending. So we knew it was going to be a particularly tough year. State lawmakers were able to pass a number of bills that did raise some new revenues, raise new taxes on cloud software and a few others to help buy that down, and also to put a few cost containment measures in place as well, making tweaks to some of the equity provisions in the pupil weighting law from last year. And also, probably one of those key factors here is they also created this task force, this study task force, which will take a look over the next anywhere from 14 to 18 months of what should the future of education look like, what is a sustainable way to fund it, because as of right now, the cost of education has just been continuing to rise over the past 20 years. Our demographics are declining. We have fewer students in school, and our academic achievement and our test scores really are continuing to stay stagnant. So that's what that task force is going to be looking for, and will be doing. But there definitely was some frustration, especially among Republicans and even Governor Phil Scott, that we heard that lawmakers were not doing enough this year, and that a 14% increase would be disastrous for many people. So it's a real tough topic at the State House, and there's certainly a lot of feelings over it on everybody's side.
Yeah, Calvin, absolutely, and I look forward, of course, to your follow-up. I know we got a morning meeting, just hop into just a few minutes. Just really quick, for people who aren't super familiar with the legislative process, what's next? What's as far as next steps for all this and the vetoes go, what can people expect as far as changes just down the line?
Yeah, so I think, in terms of some of these policies that are in effect, it depends on each one of these bills, right? Some of them, like the Renewable Energy Standard or the Safe Injection Site Bill, they still have certain steps to go before they're fully implemented. Like for the Safe Injection Sites, the health department has to come up with certain rules and, implement those, or certain guidelines, that is. So it could be a couple of years before that's fully implemented. The Act 250 proposal, we're going to have this new professional board, which is going to adopt these rules and regulations of how this new tiered Act 250 jurisdictional system will work. Others, some bills that were passed during the legislative session go into effect on July 1st as well. So that's the next deadline here. And then, of course, with the yield bill that goes into effect on July 1st as well, property taxes will come due later this year. But in terms of building policy and building specific pieces of legislation, or trying to take another bite at the apple for ones that didn't make it across, like the data privacy bill, this is really the end of the line. This was the second year of the biennium, so state lawmakers, if they want to try again, they'll have to do it again next January. But that will be, of course, after the August primaries and after the November election, and we'll have a new state legislature, and that could really have a big effect on the direction or the size and scope of certain policies that the legislature chooses to adopt. There's about 19 or 20 seats that will be turning over in the House, and also there's 6 seats which are open in the Senate, which really represents a huge shift in how business may be conducted there, what types of bills are taken up, and what the fiscal direction and priorities of the Senate will be. So I think that's going to be the next thing to watch is coming into election season here. What will be the philosophical and the fiscal outlook, if you will, of the state, but also of each of the chambers.
No, of course, Calvin, and of course that sounds like got your work cut out for you the last few months. And Calvin, thanks so much for stopping by again. I know I'm kind of holding you up right now, but I really appreciate you shedding some light for some people there for what could be a pretty dense topic. But Calvin, thanks for stopping by, and I'll let you get cooking.
Absolutely. Always a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thanks. That was our political reporter, Calvin Cutler. Of course, he is pretty much always at the State House at this point. So a big day for him yesterday, and appreciate him coming on. I think that kind of does it for us here. Screen behind me, of course, turned off, died out. So with that in mind, I'll cut you guys loose, and we'll see you at WCAX at noon. But yeah, thanks for tuning in.